Okay, welcome everyone. This is our monthly Ayurveda community session. So we're holding our class topic this month on what is ama. Now, ama is usually kind of loosely translated as toxins, but we want to, or in other words, toxins, also known as metabolic waste products that build up and accumulate in the body that later cause health challenges and develop or form into illness and disease. So what we're going to explore today is a more deeper understanding of what is this term ama, which is the Sanskrit word, and we use this as a Sanskrit non-translatable. So it's not, the Sanskrit language is so rich and beautiful. So we don't want to just loosely translate to English this term toxins, which sounds so negative and toxic, right? We want to unpack and understand a little bit more of what ama actually is and the different viewpoints throughout the ancient texts of Ayurveda. There are several different authorities on Ayurveda that have different perspectives. So we're going to explore some of the perspectives and what this word means. And we also want to explore, well, how does that accumulate in our body? And how do we know if we have excess of that in our body? What are the signs and symptoms of that? And how does that progress into illness? We'll explore the 6 stages of progression called samprapti in Ayurveda. And we'll also look at how do we reverse those 6 stages, and how can we cleanse whatever's excess in our body that might be causing us ill health, so that we can return to our wholeness, our vitality, our health, and really optimizing all of our bodily tissues and functions in the body. So we'll explore, we will at least endeavor to start to explore these topics in this hour. Sometimes I usually go over an hour. I aim for an hour, and usually it's like an hour, 15 minutes, hour and a half. So we'll see how it goes today. If you have questions that come up throughout the class, please type them in the chat. You can type them as they're fresh, and I will probably answer them towards the end of class once I switch my screens over and look at that part of the screen. So don't worry, write them down while they're fresh and I'll answer them later. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, of course. Okay, so to begin, I just want to start with a little invocation prayer and give you a moment of brief meditation and connection to your breath and to the source of life, to the source of all medicine, to the source of all healing, and to the original cause, creation of Ayurveda, which is the Dhanvantari mantra. So as I chant this, you can just take a few deep breaths to come into yourself, into the present moment, and offer thanks to health and to life. So taking one deep breath in and letting all the air out. And then one breath to fill up and ground and center. Namami Dhanvantari Devam Surasurer Vandita Pada Padamam Loke Jararu Bhayamrityunashanam Tatharamisham Vividhoshadinam Om Dhanvantaraye Hari Om. So what is ama? Ama, this beautiful sutra that Dr. Ladd, I think, wrote himself as he compiled through all of his 50, 60 years of studying Ayurveda. He shares, ama manarasam kechit, kechit tumalasam chayam, pratamam dosha dushtim cha, kechit amam prachakshate. So in this sutra, this is giving us the 3 views on ama that are kind of summaries of the Brihatrayi, which are the three main ancient texts that Ayurveda comes from. So these texts, if essentially all of these authorities, which without getting into all of the background, this sutra says, Kechit, according to some of the authorities on Ayurveda, ama is amam anarasam. So ama is anarasa. Ana is food. You might recognize this word from the food body, annamaya kosha. So this is the body of food. This is like the physical building blocks of what we eat becomes our physical flesh and tissue. Rasa in Ayurveda is the juice. So anna rasa is the food juice, the basic, most fundamental building blocks of your physiology, of your physical body. So this might be translated to mean microchyle. It's basically the first food substance. Like when you ingest food, it goes through your digestive system, and then nutrients and building blocks become yielded into your bloodstream that circulates your body, looking for their home to build new, fresh, healthy bodily tissues. So that anarasa is the ahara rasa, which is the food juice. It is the first fundamental kind of grossest element of these building blocks that is derived from nature coming into your body. And so ama, from some authorities, say that ama is anarasam, meaning, but it's undigested food. So it's this microchyle that hasn't actually become the building blocks yet for your body. So because it's undigested, it circulates in the system as waste. So if you think about like cooking a pot of rice on the stove, you put the raw rice and the water into the pot, and then you put it on a fire, and you need that fire to be a certain amount of heat, and it needs to come to a boil, and then you reduce it and simmer it, and there's kind of this formula of what needs to happen. It needs to have a high heat, and then it needs to have a stable heat. It needs to, have enough heat to come to a boil so that it can cook the rice all the way. So what happens if the fire is too high? All the water will evaporate, the rice will remain raw and uncooked and crunchy, or it might get burnt or scorched. If the flame is too low, it still only has a certain amount of time. Sure, you could argue, well, if I put it in the, in the, what do you call it, crock pot on a really low heat for a long time, but yeah, it also turns to mush, right? And it's kind of sludgy. It's not like the fluffy rice that you really enjoy. So if the flame is too low, it turns into slushy, sludgy, probably also hard, crunchy rice, not fully cooked. So what this kechit is referring to in the anarasa, the ama anarasam, is that there's an undigested thing happening here. The food, the fire isn't burning optimally. It's either too low or too high. Thus, it's resulting in either overly burned, scorched, dry food that can't be digested because, right, you don't want to eat that rice that was just, you forgot to turn the heat down, and you leave it on the stove and you're like, oh shoot, I should have put it in the rice cooker because now all the water boiled over and now there's not enough water for the rice to absorb, and now it's ruined. So you don't want to eat that rice. It's very hard for your body to digest that rice, right? And then also on the lower side, if you give in the same amount of time on a really low heat, you never bring the rice to a boil, it's not going to fully cook and you're not going to want to eat that. It's going to give you indigestion. So same thing, your digestive fire has to cook everything you put into your mouth. You pre-cook it outside, it cooks again on the inside, and it needs to break it down optimally, and it only has a certain amount of time to travel through the digestive system also to make room for the next food coming in and everything. So whatever is, if it's not the optimal, if it's not the optimal cooking heat and cooking process, then this results in ama. Amam ana rasat kechit. So some authorities on Ayurveda and the ancient texts say that ama is undigested food. And undigested food results from a digestive fire that doesn't cook the food all the way inside your body. Therefore, but it's still inside your body. So now what does your body do with it? It's got to get rid of it somehow. This is what we are loosely calling metabolic waste. At that point, it's not technically metabolic waste, right? Because metabolic waste is just the normal waste that your body's metabolism, it has a normal metabolic waste process that it needs to eliminate every day. This is actually more than metabolic waste. This is ama. But it's also doesn't translate to the word toxins, although it does become toxic in the system. But this is why it's so confusing, because we think of toxins, quote unquote, we think of toxins as something environmental, like chemicals, like toxins we're exposed to that are somehow detrimental to our body. They're poisons, right? But in this definition, we're starting to understand, whoa, amam anarasam. Ama is also undigested food. I thought food was my medicine. I thought as long as I ate a clean organic food, plant-based diet, etc., gluten-free, vegan, whatever, as long as I'm eating a clean diet, everyone defines clean different, that's why I put in air quotes, but as long as I'm eating a clean diet, I should be healthy, right? But we're not only what we consume. Our body becomes what we can digest. And if the digestive fire isn't optimal, or if you're eating too much food or too little food, or you're eating not at the right time or the right foods for the right season, etc., the body has a hard time digesting it. So no matter how clean you're eating, it's still possible for ama to accumulate. And there's so much nuance in that. So I'll leave it at that for now. So this first of the three views on ama is amam ana rasam kechit. So some authorities say ama is undigested food. Now you can simply leave it at that, and we could spiral into that over and over, deeper and deeper, for so long, discussing all the ways that happens. And we will continue that part. But let's go to the second part. So the second part says kechit tu malasam chayam. Kechit, again, some authorities say ama is mala samchayam. So mala is waste products, and samchai is referring to their accumulation, or sanchai, which is also the first stage of disease, as you'll see in the model of samprapti. So sanchai means accumulation, and mala is waste. So mala is urine, feces, sweat, essentially. These are actual metabolic wastes. So if for some reason the body's elimination channels through urine, through feces, through sweat, through the pores of the skin, if the body is unable to eliminate excesses in the same proportion of time that they are coming into the body or building up in the body, if the body can't eliminate them at the same rate that they're being produced, this part of this sutra is saying that they accumulate, and then that becomes ama. So ama is undigested food, according to some, and ama is uneliminated accumulated waste products, according to others. In this aspect of this part of the definition of Ayurveda, this can bring us deep into the topic of the non-suppression of urges. So there's a huge section of the ancient texts that are dedicated just to the non-suppression of urges. Or even if it wasn't a huge section, it's just huge emphasis, a huge emphasis on we should never suppress our natural bodily urges. And there's a whole long list of urges, and three of those urges is the need to defecate, the need to urinate, and the need to move air down or up. So burping, coughing, hiccuping, all of that, and releasing air down and out, and also eliminating down and out through the channels of urine and feces. So when we hold it, we are blocking the channels of elimination, and that creates future blockage, and that energetically prevents the flow from moving in the directions it needs to move. And when the flow is prevented from moving in the directions it needs to move, it starts to accumulate there. So if you, for example, if you really have to urinate and you keep holding it because you're busy, for example, but you keep holding it and you really have to go, what happens is that your mind starts getting crazy. Why is that? You get agitated, like you're on a long road trip and you're like, I can't even think anymore. I need to pull over. Can you not think anymore? Because that energy, that prana, is trying to move down and out. It's trying to engage apana vayu, where the energy can go down, but you're blocking it through constriction. And so what happens is the energy that's trying to go down is now bouncing up, and it's accumulating in your mind, and this feeling of like, in your head. So same thing with vata imbalances. For example, vata is the principle of air and wind, and it's found in more drier body constitutions, people who are prone to constipation, for example. We tend to, as like vata people, tend to have more fear and anxiety or hypermobile thoughts. And that is directly related energetically to constipation, to this dryness of the colon, because the body's not lubricated, so the energy is not moving down and it's not allowing for a release down. So this energy accumulates upward moving into what we experience as our head. Although the mind is in the head, it's located in every cell. The mind actually in activity. It's a whole nother story, but we experience it like in our head because most of our senses, a good majority of our senses, are in our head. So we experience it as I want to withdraw my senses, right? So this kechitu malasanchaya, so that some authorities in the ancient Ayurvedic texts say, is the accumulation of malas. So one of the causes for the withholding of the movements of natural bodily, painful or wrong about the bodily urges. They're normal and natural and the flow in all ways. So if you want a flow of energy and health, you have to really support the elimination travel channels to have good flow, and then good health will follow. So we will also continue to unpack that third. So let's move to the third part of the three views on ama. So we said so far, amam annarasam kechit tu malasam chayam pratamam dosha dushtim cha kechit amam prachakshate. So the highlighted phrase in this last line is dosha dushti. Dosha dushti. So, and finally, according to others, the previously disturbed doshas is also ama. So all three of these are ama. Now, this one requires a little bit more unpacking, especially if you're unfamiliar with this term dosha. So dosha is, we can think of doshas, there's a lot of different ways to approach this, and I hesitate to approach it in such a light manner without all the background of Sankhya philosophy and all these beautiful foundational understandings of the elements and nature and how we're connected. We're an inseparable aspect of nature. But just for one little touch point, we'll define dosha in this way. So most people think of dosha, if you've studied a little Ayurveda through Dr. Google, you'll think dosha is just my body constitution. and it's vata, pitta, or kapha, and I'm one of these things, and that's just who I am. So dosha is not just your body constitution. So I want to define it in this context as dosha is one of the three fundamental functional ways that the elements work in your body. Everyone has all three, and you can almost look at a dosha as an essential waste product, because when you hear an Ayurvedic doctor refer to dosha, they're talking about what's in excess. Usually they're not talking about what's the healthy baseline for someone's body constitution, although that is a good start for most people's learning. They're actually saying there's dosha, or when they're referring to dosha, they're referring to dosha dushti. Dushti means something that's imbalanced. So when there's dushti of the dosha, that means there's excess. So think, for example, the waste products we were just talking to a moment ago. So urine, feces, and sweat, they're waste products, right? So we don't think of them as like, oh, it's an essential part of the body, but the body would cease to exist without them, right? They need to be there. But the thing about waste products is that they need to be constantly moving out. So they constantly accumulate, and they constantly need to be leaving the body. So waste products, malas, urine, feces, and sweat, are essential to your body health. They're constantly accumulating, and they constantly need to be moving out. Doshas are that too. You always have this foundation of constitution, but then you have what varies from that, which we often call vikriti, which is what's in excess. Which of these bodily elements, these functional elements of vata, pitta, or kapha, the vayu, the air, the movement, the pitta, the fire, the kapha, the watery earth element, which of these are baseline, prakriti, and which are these are vikriti, in excess? When they're excess, they're always accumulating, and they always need to be moving out of the body. So people have more, gosh, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to Ayurveda right now. I know a lot of you have been following my work for at least, I don't know, months, or if not several years. So I'm just hoping that all of you who are here listening to this have the foundation for the words that I'm using for these doshas. I know we've talked about them in previous classes. It's so hard to jump into it if I think that some of you might be new to the language. I feel like I'm doing a disservice here. But anywho, I digress. I say that all just to really pay my respects to Ayurveda. So when there are excesses, that basically we have a baseline, which is your constitution, then those excesses are constantly, every day, we're going through a 24-hour cycle of dosha, quote unquote, in the environment. These vata, pitta, and kapha are increasing and decreasing, waxing and waning through cycles throughout 24 hours, which means in your very body, they're constantly fluctuating up and down, constantly fluctuating up and down. And so these are rhythms that our bodies are inherently and innately connected to in nature. And then throughout the seasons, like we're kind of in the Northern Hemisphere, we're ending our summer right now. Unless you're in San Diego, you're going to get that second summer heat that comes back through and re-triggers all the heat that built up for the summer. But I live in Oregon. I'm in Southern Oregon. So we're just starting to come into a cooler phase. And so what happens over the course of the summer is that Pitta, which is our internal bodily fire element, the sun that lives inside of us, is Pitta. Because the sun is in excess in the summertime, throughout those months, it starts to accumulate in our body. This creates dosha dushti. This creates dosha dushti. So this creates an increase inside of our body. Now, if you're also a pitta predominant person, meaning your bodily constitution has a lot of fire, has a lot of solar energy, has a lot of sun, has a lot of heat disturbances, like you have inflammation and you have excessive heat or acidic situations happening in your health. These are all, you're more prone to sensitivity of heat. The more exposure you have to the sun, to the heat, to the daylight, etc., it's going to slowly increase. And then if you eat chilies and drink a lot of chai all summer long with the hot spices and ginger and things like that, now you're increasing. So this creates dosha dushti. So the heat increases. So now by the time it starts to cool off in the fall, then there's an accumulation of pitta that is in excess. It's actually like a mulla sunchai. It's an accumulation, but not of waste products per se, not the waste products of urine that we know as urine, feces, and sweat. It's a dosha dushti, meaning it's an increase and an accumulation of inflammation and acidity that has built up over the course of the summer. And now that's needing to leave. And if it doesn't leave, it becomes its own form of ama. So this is called pitta ama. And it might be mixed with undigested food or uneliminated wastes as the other parts of this definition. But it is accumulating, and it will stagnate, and it will inflame the tissues and acidify the body if it doesn't leave. So this is why we do fall cleansing protocols, for example. In the autumn, it's about releasing excess inflammation and acidity that accumulated over the summer. And then we can go into winter clean without internalizing that acidity, because then that acidity gets reabsorbed in the body and creates deeper inflammatory problems, which we'll see in the 6 stages of samprapti. But then if we eliminate that in the fall, then what happens over the winter is now we go into kapha season. Kapha is water and earth. It's cold. It's building. So kapha, we're more still and stable. We have a stronger appetite, and we can, really build up that stable kapha in our body, muscle and healthy fat. But then excess still builds in the winter. And then in the spring, we do a kapha melt, which is the cleanse Vaijanuva and I ran in the spring, which was to eliminate the excess kapha that builds up over the winter. And then the spring comes, and the increasing warmth starts to melt the ice-capped mountains, if you will, the snow in the mountains. And so in your body, all that ice starts to melt and all the mucus comes out. This is why we have seasonal allergies and mucus and colds. We're prone to colds and stuff in the spring. So this is all dosha dushti in its most basic, simple form. So dosha dushti happens in the winter, and this is like a typical spring situation that I'm describing. And then dosha dushti can happen over the summer because the heat accumulates, and then we want to do more of a pitta anti-inflammatory, soothing, cooling cleanse for pitta in the fall to release that out. So that's just one little example of dosha dushti. So ammam anarasam kechit tumalasam chayam pratamam dosha dushtim cha kechit amam prachakshate. So according to some, undigested wastes, according to some, ama is undigested food. According to others, ama is undigested waste products. And then according to still other authorities, ama is pitta imbalance in my house right now. That means someone's cooking something really good in the kitchen. Um, so according to others, previously disturbed dosha. I like how we just said dosha dushti and the alarms went off. That's actually the perfect segue into the signs and symptoms. These are the alarms that go off. So what are the signs and symptoms? I'm going to run through these a little quicker for your own self-inquiry. And I will also, hopefully you're on my email list, I will email these class notes out to you along with the recording of today's class. Okay, so you can have a little bit more of a visual, especially with all of these Ayurvedic terms I'm kind of throwing at you, all these Sanskrit terms. So it's nice to just have the list that you can kind of go through and check off. So first of all, there's signs and symptoms of ama, which means it's a more deeply embedded, more deeply ingrained situation that's happening. The early warning signs before it even gets to ama are signs and symptoms of indigestion. Because as we said, the digestive fire, the sun that lives inside of your body, its central home is called Jatara Agni. Its central home is in your stomach. And from that home, it governs all the other 40 Agnis of your bodily organs and bodily tissues. And then really it's like millions of Agnis, because Pilu and Pitara Agni are the teeny tiny little Agni that resides at the center of every cell of your body. So that's the metabolic fire. And the Jatara Agni, your central fire, is like the director of all the other fires. So this is why in Ayurveda we emphasize so much of optimizing the Agni and making sure Agni is always burning brilliantly and not too hot, not too low, not too big of a fire, not too small of a fire, just right kind of fire. And that ensures that the food that you eat is well metabolized for your body. So the first list that I'm going to give you is signs and symptoms of indigestion. These are things that you would experience immediately. So like I ate a meal and I guess that was the wrong thing for me, or it was at the wrong time, or if it was in the wrong consciousness of mind, or it was rushed, or it was whatever. I got indigestion from eating that thing. And now I gotta pause and make sure I reset, my gut so that it doesn't accumulate to ama. Most of us, before we become aware of this, we just kept having indigestion and dealing with it and enduring it day after day after day, week after week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. And then it's absolutely turned into ama, and it goes through these 6 stages. And then all of a sudden, we might not have the body sensitivity or the language to even self-reflect as Ayurveda gives. All of a sudden, one day, we're sick, or we can't find the answers to what's wrong with us. Or we go to the doctors and they say, I don't know why you're in all this pain, because your tests come back fine. It's negative. So I don't know what to tell you. Well, that's because Western medicine is really highly proficient at detecting and diagnosing stage, not always even diagnosing, but at least detecting stage 5 and 6 of the 6 stages of Samprapti. Ayurveda, in its more subtle, refined ability, is able to show you the map of stages 1, 2, 3, and 4 that lead up to 5 and 6. And then with that map of the 6 stages, it can show you how to reverse those 6 stages, no matter where you are. But most of our current medical models don't have the refined ability to see stages 1 through 4. Ayurveda, being that it's the original medicine, and it has that lens. So we want to, and I want to empower you with that lens, as my teachers have empowered me and helped me heal. I want to show this to you so you can see. But it starts first with the very simple basics of Am I having indigestion right now? And what can I do with that immediately? And then if I have chronic indigestion that may have already contributed to ama, well, then what are the signs and symptoms of ama? And how can I break those down to understand and what's going on with these 6 stages? And then how can I get back? And then, so we want to understand the process of cleansing, which we won't get into today, but if this is something that you want to explore further, please let me know your interest. And I think I'm leading a retreat next week for the next 10 days. And then when I get back from that, sometime in October, I think we'll do the next class on cleansing, and then we can take this topic deeper. And then also for those of you who want to just be led through an actual pitta cleanse, I think I'll do that in October too. So we did the spring one for kapha melt, and I think we'll do one in October with my mentor Vaijanuva, and we'll break that down and take you through a cleanse protocol. It's very profound, especially since I started partnering with my mentor of the last 7 years. He's brilliant, and I would love to introduce you to him. So signs and symptoms of indigestion. Very, very poetic sounding topic. Okay, let's break this one down. And then how are we doing on time? All right, just over halfway. I'm going to just read it through. I'm trying not to go off on too many tangents. Here are the signs and symptoms of indigestion according to Ayurveda. Vibando tipravritirva glanir maruta mudata ajirna lingam samanyam vishtambo gaurava brahma. The most common signs and symptoms of indigestion are constipation. So vibando is constipation. Banda is like a bind. So vibando means bound. So the colon is bound. It's not able to release. Tipravritti is referring to ati pravritti. Pravritti is flow. Ati pravritti is excessive flow. So we're translating to, it means diarrhea. So either not enough stools are leaving the body or too much all at once, which essentially means I'm not absorbing nutrients. So vibando tipravrittirva. Constipation and diarrhea. If you're having either one of those, or if you lean towards either one of those, or you have alternating of those, indigestion's happening, so something's going on with Agni. We need to heal and restore the digestive fire. Glanir is referring to tiredness, fatigue. If you're feeling like when you eat a meal, if you feel like sluggish or sleepy, or your mind becomes dull after you eat, that's a symptom of indigestion. Most people think of indigestion as just belly related, but mental related and energy levels are directly related to indigestion, or healthy digestion or indigestion. Maruta is blocked vata. Maruta refers to the wind, but it's specifically when wind gets blocked. So those are all the examples I gave earlier. When you hold your urine, you're blocking vata. So there are many other ways that manifests, and I'm not going to go on a total tangent, but there's lots of symptoms of what blocked vata is, and some of the ones are the ones I talked about earlier. But it's always vata being blocked. It creates a lot of pranic imbalances. So if there's stiffness or tightness in the body or rigidity, these are all signs and symptoms. These are all examples of mudata, maruta mudata. Maruta mudata ajirna lingam sanamyam vishtambo gaurava brahma. Ajirna, it technically means vata, it technically means indigestion, but we're actually talking about uncooked. So ajirna is referring to it hasn't properly cooked all the way in the gut. So this ends up turning into abdominal distension. So when either it's overcooked or undercooked. So if you, for example, if you do a food combining, poor food combining, or say you eat sweet fruits with like meats or beans or something like that. If you eat fruits and cheese and meats or beans, usually this creates an incompatible food combining that creates ajirna. It starts to like ferment and putrefy in the gut. This is all ajirna. And then that creates these gases. It releases these gases, and it will create a distension that happens from the inside and pushes out. So your belly feels like hard and kind of protruding. And it may or may not have gas that moves with it. The gas can be stuck. Another example of Maruta Mudata is the air, like you have distension that's not relieved by passing air, because the air might be blocked. So these are all symptoms of indigestion. And then the last two are Gaurava and Brahma. These are referring to a sense of guru means heavy in Ayurveda. So Gaurava is the expansive Sanskrit term that sound Gaurava is an increase of heaviness. So it's a feeling of heaviness, lethargy. And then Brahma is expansiveness. So in a symptomatology, this is referring to dizziness. So if you get a sense of dizziness, lightheadedness, feeling of being spaced out, that's actually a sign of indigestion. So, and then also a feeling of lethargy, fatigue, tiredness, heaviness, like the body feels heavy. After you eat, your body should feel light and energized, and your mind should feel clear. And you should feel fueled, and you should feel also peaceful, satiated. These are all signs of healthy digestion. So this Ayurvedic sutra is common signs of indigestion. Now, what happens when it goes all the way into ama? I'm going to read you this sutra from the Ayurvedic text. So if that indigestion is continuing over days, months, weeks, years, decades of your life, then it accumulates, ama accumulates much quicker. Actually, the months and years portion is the sequential stages of samprapti, where ama continues accumulating, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But while you have your notes, signs and symptoms of ama. So you can self-reflect and say, oh, do I have any of these going on? Shrotarota bhalabramsha gauravani lamudata alasya pakti nishtiva malasanga ruchiklamaha. So these signs and symptoms of ama are clogging of the bodily channels, like total clogging of the channels, low energy. And this is usually low energy because there's a low energy immediately after the meal. That's indigestion. Low energy all of the time as a baseline, or very often feeling low energy. This is more of a sign of ama. Now, low energy can also come from other processes in the body. It can come situationally because your body's fighting a microbe and you need rest. It can come, tiredness can come just because your body needs to process something emotionally. It doesn't always mean that there's ama. But if there's ama, there's most likely low energy. Yeah, and there are even other reasons. Sometimes when vata is really high and vata crashes, it's a depletion, exhaustion, and that fatigue is not from ama, that's from a depletion. So just know that low energy here, we're talking that is one symptom, but it doesn't always mean it's ama. Okay, but low energy is definitely created. It happens as a result of accumulated ama. So sense of heaviness, we heard that word gauravani lamudata. So there's another gaurava, sense of heaviness. But the anila mudata is referring to, similar to the last sutra, but now we're increasing it. So restlessness. So this is you wouldn't normally think if I'm restless and I'm like feeling agitated, I'm not able to sleep, I'm not able to like think straight, I'm not able to just sit still, or if you're a yogi or meditator, it's hard to like sit still to do your practice, like always need to be moving and doing something, or just feeling internally agitated. This is actually could be a sign. This is one of the signs of ama. It doesn't mean that it's ama. If you feel restless, it could be a vata imbalance, or it can be an ama situation, and it can be vata and ama potentially together. So deep lethargy, indigestion, we already mentioned. If there's indigestion continues, it turns into ama, and usually the indigestion symptoms continue. And then also if ama is accumulating, we get kapha type congestion. So a lot of like mucus in the throat, in the lungs, sometimes expectoration, where we're constantly like clearing our throat, or constantly coughing, or having to like clear our throat, or there could be mucus in the sinuses that builds up. And it doesn't always have to be microbial. It doesn't always have to be because of a pathogen. It could just be that there's ama building up in the system and the body's trying to get rid of the excess. And then accumulation of the three malas, urine, feces, and sweat. Where was I in the Alasya Pakvi Nishtiva Malasanga Ruchiklamaha? Malasanga is accumulation of waste products. And then loss of taste and is actually a symptom of ama. It's not only a symptom of certain pathogens. It's also a symptom of ama accumulated in the body. And then exhaustion. So it goes from heaviness and fatigue into deeper lethargy, deeper exhaustion. So a lot of the symptoms that we previously mentioned, plus taken into deeper context of deeper disease process. And in addition to these symptoms that I rattled off of ama, there might be tissue specific symptoms that you experience. So for example, excessive vata in the joints means it's at stage 4 of the samprapti process, meaning that means that might look like osteoarthritis, or rheumatoid arthritis, for example, would be stage 4 or 5. And that would look like pitta lodged in the joints, where the joints start to get hot and inflamed and painful. So that's still ama. But now it's not just systemic ama creating lethargy and fatigue and indigestion. The ama it continued to accumulate in the body, and it had nowhere to go. So where is it going to go? It's got to find somewhere to go. And it's going to go into the areas of the body that have the most predisposition, or the weakest identities, which is what we kind of refer to as genetics, or predispositions due to past history, whether it was some kind of emotional or physical injury to that particular tissue. Then it creates what we call a kavaigunya, which is a weakened space in the body that's not as strong as the other tissues. It's a slightly weakened area of the body, and all that excess ama that continues to accumulate ends up lodging into those tissues and then creating pain and problems later on. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes. So I'm already kind of moving into this description of the 6 stages. So I just want to spell those out for you quickly so you can get an idea, a little bit more of a specific idea of what's happening here. All right. And then I see there's a couple questions. Thank you all for your participation and encouragement of teaching Ayurveda. So awesome. Okay, and then Matt, I'll answer that question after we go through the 6 stages. Thank you. All right, let's see. I can share my screen. Is it showing? Yeah. All right. This is a very new thing to me. This sharing the whiteboard. So let's see if it works. Well, it's new with Zoom anyway. Technological whiteboard. I had to try to bring it online because it's just too fun in person to have a whiteboard and draw on it. Okay, so the 6 stages. Let's see. Is that showing? Now I can't see what you're seeing. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Someone just give me a little thumbs up if you can see it. Am I frozen?
We can see it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kaylee. All your videos froze for a second. Okay. So 6 stages of Samprapti. I'll read you the Ayurvedic Sutra first, and then I'll break it down to the 6. Sanchayam cha prapakopam cha prasaram stana samshayam yaktim bedam chayoveti doshanam sabhaved bishak. So this sutra, the full sutra says, the person who knows the stages of the doshas, which are accumulation, provocation, spreading, deposition, manifestation, and differentiation, is a Vaidya, an Ayurvedic physician. So this is why Ayurveda, this is the glory of Ayurveda. I'm like, so always come back to this sutra because it's so amazing and so enlightening. And I was completely blown away when I first learned this. It just made so many things clear. So the first stage is called, we already heard this word, Sanchai. Sanchai is the accumulation stage. I'm gonna let you guys write it in your notes and I'm gonna draw you a little picture. So you want to imagine this stage. So we want to imagine our body or our digestive system in this context as like a bucket. So we have a bucket. Forgive my crude drawings. Here's a little bucket. So Sanchai is referring to the accumulation. So we kind of started to talk about the reasons for accumulation, with Jatara Agni being impaired, the fire being too low or too high, and then all of this excessive waste starting to accumulate, right? So it's like this, our body is like this bucket and it only has so much it can hold. By the way, this is like a little side note. This is a practical side note referring to leftover food. Some people have a really hard time letting leftover food go to the trash or whatever. So they say, well, I don't want it to go to waste. But the food gets wasted outside your body or inside your body. And if you have a compost, it never gets wasted. It just goes back into growing new food in your garden. But that's besides the point. The food gets quote unquote wasted inside your body or outside your body. So your body, would you rather your body have to deal with the waste? This is what's happening if it's getting wasted inside your body. So it's still, I can't see it. Okay, my silly little drawing's coming up. Okay, great. So it's accumulating. So in stage 1, every day that I overeat, every day that I am not, or every day that my gut's not able to fully digest the food into nutrients and transform it into energy for all my metabolic processes and my mind and my movements and my service in life, all of that, if it's not digesting it, it's accumulating. And then in stage 2, basically it reaches the top of this bucket and it becomes what we call provoked. It's now in the provocation stage. So stage 2 is like, it's like spilling over. It's just starting to spill over. So stage 1 is accumulation. Stage 2 we call provocation or prakopa. Sanchayam cha prakopam cha prasaram sthana samshayam. Stage 3 is prasara. Prasara. Sara means spreading. So prasara means now it begins to spread. It's the beginning of the spreading stage. So that bucket overflows and now it is spilling over and it's starting to spread in these little rivers all over the ground. Right? That's my beautiful drawing of Amma spilling over. It's spilling over. So prasara means now it starts to spread. So spreading. In stage 4, this is sthana samshray. Sthana samshray. So this is where we just left off in our previous sutra. So right now, every day, every meal we eat, our digestion's impaired, or we're overeating, or we're eating the wrong things, or eating too much of the wrong things, or whatever the case is. It's overflowing. And every day, every single meal, so multiple times a day, our body's not able to fully break down and transform the foods that we eat into healthy building blocks. It is creating this byproduct, this waste product that's undigested food stuff. And every day that continues to accumulate. So this bucket up here is continuing to fill up, right? Every day that we're eating and not digesting. And, some of it is still keeping us alive. Some of it is able to be transformed. It doesn't mean that we stop eating. We have to keep eating. But if the digestive fire's impaired, then it's not digesting optimally. So this accumulation continues to happen. And it continues to add to the spilling over. And it continues to add to this going over and over and over. It continues every day. So now there's more coming. There's more accumulation happening under the surface. And all of this, where is this going to go? Because it's still in your body. Your body hasn't been able to eliminate it. So it's got to do something with it. What's it going to do with it? It's going to go to it's going to go sequentially, which we did this in our last month's class. We talked about Dhatu nutrition, the 7 stages of tissue nutrition in last month's class. It goes to Rasa, Rakta, Mamsa, Meda, Asti, Maja, Shukra, or Artava. So it goes through this process of trying to excess into Rasa, put its excess into Rakta, put its excess into Mamsa, Meda, Asti, Maja, Shukra, or Artava. So it goes through the lymph and the blood plasma. If that tissue is too strong and it's like, no room for waste here because it's got a strong identity, it's healthy, it's strong, then it tries to this accumulation. It tries to go to the next place. It's looking for the weak link is what I'm saying. It's looking for the weak link. If there's predisposition to blood conditions, say in the family, it ends up going into the Rakta Dhatu, the red blood cells, and creates anemia or creates other destructive diseases in the blood. If the Rakta is too strong, it goes to the next one, Mamsa, the muscle tissue. This could be smooth muscle tissue. This could be skeletal muscle tissue. This could be heart muscle tissue. This could be any muscle tissue, but it lodges itself This is stage 4 is the stage called, it translates to mean deposition. It's the easiest way we can translate, deposition. So this excess of constant accumulation and provocation and spreading is now spreading, and it's going to deposit somewhere. If it deposits, it's going to deposit in the lymph, or it's going to deposit in the red blood cells. It's going to deposit in the muscle tissue, or it's going to deposit in the fat tissue, meta, also giving rise to high cholesterol, all of that, all of the fats in the body. And it's going to disturb the hormones, or it's going to deposit into the asti dhatu, which is the bone tissue, is going to lodge into the joints. It's going to lodge into creating arthritis. It's going to lodge in and create other situations in bones, diseases of the bones. Or it's going to go into maja dhatu, the nervous system, and it can create demyelination disorders. It can create all kinds of imbalances in the nervous system. Or it goes all the way, wherever there's a weak link, it will deposit its excess into one or more weak links. So then the last one is Shukra and Artava, which is the reproductive system, and create imbalances there. So this is where the 6 stages become highly individualized and specific to every individual person, because your symptoms, quote unquote, we just mentioned the signs and symptoms of AMA, but your symptoms will be different based on which of the tissues are actually this excess on AMA deposits into. Okay, so then stage 5 and 6 goes whichever of those tissues it then deposits into. It then goes through these next stages. So let me pull this down. Vyakti. Actually, maybe I can do this. Vyakti and Beta are the last 2. There we go. Oops. Autocorrect. Beta. Okay. So Stanastamshrai, it deposits into one of these 7 tissues, Rasa, Rakta, Mamsa, Meda, Asti, Maja, and or Shukra, Artava. It might deposit in one or many and create complexes. It's because our tissues are not just standalone, tissues. They're not objects. There are metabolic processes that work in relationship with each other. So there's more refinement, obviously, than what I'm presenting here. But this is just for your first glimpse into Samprapti and starting to understand what are these stages happening. So then it deposits, and then there's first stages of certain signs and symptoms that will happen when AMA is depositing into one or more of the bodily tissues. And then Vyakti means essentially, it means manifestation. So Vyakti, you can write in your notes, manifestation. And that's when you get the diagnosis. Oh, there's actually a disease that has manifested into this tissue. And like I said, the diagnostic tools of allopathy, for example, are really great at picking up on stage 5 and 6, and some on stage 4 as well. And then Beta is we'll loosely define or translate as differentiation. So where Vyakti would be a manifested disease, Beta stage is the deepest stage where, say, there's actual like a mutation of the cell. So it no longer looks like a human cell, a regular, normal, healthy, functioning human cell. So like the easiest example would be a cancerous cell. That's the Beta stage of that. That's stage 6 of this process. And even that, of course, has its own stages and things like that. But Beta means that the cells are differentiating. And so again, once we get into stage 4, 5, and 6, everything's very, very specific. So we have Vata, we defined Ama, some define Ama as excessive dosha dushti. So we can also look at Vata going through Sanchai, Prakop, Prasara, Sthana Samshai, Vyakti, Beta. And then depending on which tissue excess Vata is, it'll create a whole slew of symptoms. So now you can kind of see, and the same thing for Pitta going through all 6, or the same thing for Kapha going through all 6, or multiple doshas going through all 6, and then all of their different possibilities as they go through different tissues and different, nuances and complexities. So this is just the first little glimpse into the vastness of Ayurveda, having such deep wisdom and insight into the process of illness. But what's beautiful is that it's not just the study of the process of illness formation, not even that, it's literally the study of living organisms, living, breathing organisms, not static, dead organisms. It's the study of life in process. You are an active participant in through your everyday daily habits. And it's through your everyday daily habits and more nuanced relationship that you develop with your body, mind, consciousness, your habits, your relationship to food, your relationship to nature, to place, to your past, to your loved ones, to your community. Everything is interconnected in this living organism of you and nature. And so these 6 stages, they're happening, but they're in process. And that means they can be reversed. The process can be healed, because by going back and at the very first thing, starting with a reset of the Agni, starting with a reset of the digestion, starting with a boosting of the metabolic fire, and a radical, kind of cleansing of what's currently accumulating, stopping that process immediately will at least put a halt to all of that. And then the next phase is cleansing, where you actually, anything that has been lodged in Sthana Samshaya, in one of those 7 dhatus, the Sapta dhatus or beyond, can then be softened and coaxed out of there. They need to be softened and coaxed out of there. This is why Ayurveda uses so many oils. It softens, because Ama is usually oily. That's one of the qualities. It's oily. So it's not enough to do, right? Have you ever oil painted and tried to soften those, use a water-based, mixing? It doesn't work. Oil and water don't mix. So we can't just use water-based cleansing mechanisms. We do have to hydrate, and you do use water, but Ayurveda uses a lot of oil to help remove and soften the oil-based Ama. And that's what really helps get it out of the system. So you have to soften everything that has been deposited in the 7 tissues and coax it out, and then it cleanses out through the GI tract. That's the main channels of elimination, because there's 3 channels of elimination, and feces and urine are the main ones. Obviously sweat is one, but if feces and urine aren't working properly and it tries to come out of your pores, that's when you get skin illnesses and acne and pimples and boils and all kinds of things. So we do want to make sure the skin channels are open, because that will help release. But the main one is through feces and urine, those channels of the colon. And so in Ayurvedic cleansing, we take great care to restore the function of Agni. And then we use very, very highly potent, highly specific herbs that will help do some of the digestion of the ama for you so that the gut doesn't have to do it all. And then it also helps pull everything out of the body. So a little intro. We're at 12:15, so I want to make sure we go to questions. But I hope that this gave a little bit of a introduction and insight into what is ama and some of the views on ama, and then a little bit of some empowerment so you can understand where to find yourself in this glorious map of health and vitality. So I'm going to go to your questions now. Okay, beautiful. So Matt asked, okay, how long does waste remain in the body, and does autophagy from intermittent fasting support? Thank you, Matt, for your questions. Okay, so yeah, you did miss at the beginning. I said I'll grab all the questions at the end. So the first question you asked, you're curious how long waste remains in the body. I think I probably answered that by the time, since you asked this question earlier. It depends on the person. It will continue to accumulate for years and decades. It will stay lodged in there, and then it'll get lodged in there, and those tissues will become differentiated at some point, if the body's not actively eliminating it. And the autophagy from intermittent fasting support. So intermittent fasting definitely has a place in Ayurveda, or it originally comes from Ayurveda, because Ayurveda says that you shouldn't eat a heavy late dinner. You should eat a light early dinner. And so if you're following these rhythms of the sun, it's not just enough to say, okay, I'm just not going to eat for 17 hours or whatever as a minimum. You kind of want to do it with the clock to get the most benefit out of it from so there's like a little bit more refinement in it instead of just intermittent fasting. And I don't study a lot of the modern, like, new things that come out. So I haven't actually studied intermittent fasting per se. So I don't know. They might say that about the timing, but generally speaking, a kapha body type can do the longest time frame of intermittent fasting, like the full, I think, 17 hours that they recommend. But a vata or a pitta person can do moderate, and then vata person can do the smallest amount, because for blood sugar stabilization, there's just different needs that different doshas have, as well as like emotional stabilization and mental stabilization, things like that. So it's good for the gut to have many hours, of not eating, 12 hours or something, from, say, if the last meal of the day is taken by 6 p.m. or in the winter by 5 p.m. when it still has a little light in the sky. That gives you the greatest opportunity to digest and to then cleanse overnight. And then you're not eating until you break the fast, sometime in the morning, once true hunger comes back and you're well hydrated, etc. So Ayurveda would be looking at things like that. But it doesn't perfectly coincide with the rules and regulations that I've personally seen with, like, the biohacker community that talks about intermittent fasting. It's a little bit more intense and blanket protocols, and Ayurveda just never uses blanket protocols. It focuses more on encouraging someone's natural appetite. So big, like, fasting is good as an interim. If there's accumulation, we need to take a break and give the gut a break, and we need to cleanse. And then after some rules and regulations are followed to get back on track, so to speak, then the next phase would be restoring the natural intelligence of the body, which then follows its own rhythm. And it's a very subtle sattvic thing. So most people, it's hard to get attuned to that. And it's also harder to get attuned to that if you live in a city. surrounded by, a lot of other rajas and external influence. So people who live in a city do usually better to follow, some protocols with Ayurveda, and then, try to restore natural appetite as best as possible and allow the body to go through its own rhythm and dance with nature. So there's more I could say on that, but I hope that speaks to it a little bit. Going to Antares. Well, thank you for your beautiful words. Oh, there wasn't a question. Oh, Farah. You can always email me your questions. I really encourage your questions. Send them to my email, hello@alicialyndiaz.com. hello@alicialyndiaz.com. LYNN. ALICIALYNNDIAZ. Sorry, it's kind of a long name. But if you have any reflecting questions after class and anything you want me to go deeper into, your questions encourage content creation. So I would always love to hear from you. Maria. Oh yeah, I think I answered a lot of these going through. Maria asked, natural accumulations of the dosha happens also according to the seasons and even depending on the time of day, like vata accumulation in the winter, kapha and kapha in the winter. Yes. So we did talk about that. I talked about that exact example, how pitta accumulates all summer and kapha all winter. And then we use those vata transitional seasons to help cleanse them. So if you came late and missed that part, you can go back and listen to the recording because I did actually talk about that. So thank you. Could you please share what herbs help digest the ama? So there's a lot of herbs, and they're herbs that do ama. They do dipan and pachan for agni. Dipan means it kindles the agni and makes the agni burn higher. Don't use them if your agni is already burning too high. But if you have a low agni and you need it to burn higher, there are herbs like ginger, black pepper, anything that has like some heat and spice, cumin seeds, mustard seeds, etc. And then there are herbs that do pachana, which means digestion, that specifically digest ama, but it's going to be different for everybody, especially if it's in a specific tissue. So you'll have certain carrier herbs and then specific herbs that digest, and you want to direct them towards the tissues. So I can't really give you that without doing like a full kind of consult type of thing to know specifically what you need. But generally speaking, the same herbs that do dipan also do pachan. One of the best teas that you can make, herbal mixes that you can drink as a tea every day that does ama pachan, is cumin, coriander, and fennel seed tea. And you can get the whole seeds and just brew them whole and then strain it. Don't boil it together because it will get bitter, but just pour the boiling water onto those seeds and let it sit for as long as you like. The stronger the flavor that you like, the longer it sits. And then drink that every afternoon on an empty stomach. And try to eat just 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, spaced out by 4 to 6 hours, and drink that ama pachan tea mid-afternoon. You can also drink it at the end of meals if you like the taste. It helps the digestion, but it'll support. But it'll do more ama pachan if you take it on an empty 2 meals on an empty stomach. Anna, nice to see. To what does grief, loss, and shutdown create ama and completely disconnect with the brain's balance for the organs? So emotions do play into this very much. Unshed tears or unmoved, unexpressed emotions will lodge into the organs or tissues and weaken some of those aspects of our physical body. And that's where the ama might have an affinity to, because it's a weakened area, like we said in the 6 stages. But grief specifically if grief is an issue for anybody, it's not the grief itself, it's the unexpressed grief. So, and grief doesn't stagnate. Grief is an active process. And for more like beautiful, beautiful information, insight, and perspective on grief, please read the book called The Smell of Rain on Dust by Martine Prechtel. I have chills just saying the name. It's the most stunningly gorgeous perspective that I wish we as a society could restore for perspectives on grief. It's about grief and praise and transforming grief into beauty and grief as an active process. So grief only stagnates, like you're mentioning, or creates ama or shutdown when it's not moved properly. And that book is definitely a beautiful point in the right direction to help it move. And yeah. So I'll leave it at that. Blessings on your journey if that's something that you're dealing with that. Kaylee asks, would you be kind enough to give us an intro to the October Pitta detox? Perhaps a brief overview. It's only 2 weeks away. Oh, you're right. It is only 2 weeks away. And for the next 2 weeks, I'll mostly be leading a retreat. So any special herbal formulas needed? How deeply does this detox body? If someone is in stage 3 to 4, how long is the detox? Oh, Kaylee, all the best questions. This is exactly, yeah, I haven't picked the dates for it yet. I think I'll do an 8-day, and I'll just map it out. So really there's going to be the 4 days in the middle and then 2 on either end for like getting into it and then finish like leading out of it. But mainly it's 4 days in the middle that you'll want the most rest for and like internal process. And in terms of herbs, so everyone that goes through the cleanse will get a personalized consult with myself and Vaidya Nuva, and they all have to get personalized herbs from India for them. And so we'll probably do it more towards the end of October, do the consults in the beginning of October, and then everyone can get their herbs in time. But it's also, your herbs will be for at least 8 weeks of herbs. So it's really, it doesn't matter that the herbs are there before you do it, but it's nice. So all of that will be mapped out. But I won't be able to give you more details about it until I get back from the retreat. I'm sorry, but hopefully that gives you a little insight. Maria, in some of your future webinars, could you also explain the concept of pathways of disease, Rog Marga, how the aggravated doshas travel and cause different types of disease, from internal pathways, koshta, to external pathways, paya, to middle pathways, amarma, ashti, sandhi. Yeah, we can definitely. Thank you for that encouragement, Maria. That will be beautiful. We could probably do several classes, like one specifically on vata and ama and how it goes through the pathways and some of the different tissues, and then go more specifically into pitta and kapha. Those can all be separate classes. Yeah, that's beautiful. If you guys are interested in going more deeper, we can do that. Kaylee, what would you recommend for breakfast for vata pitta, barley or oatmeal or fruit? For vata pitta, it depends on the agni. So there are like foodstuffs that are really balancing for vata and pitta, but then there's also, most importantly, the state of agni and what's overall happening, or what's the direction that the body's wanting to go in. If the body has excess and wants to lose weight, that's a different kind of breakfast option than if it needs to build and it's underweight, for example. So barley would be a building one, and oats would be building. And then fruit would be very nourishing, but also lighter. So that would help if there's, so, but they can both of those options could be just fine for a vata pitta. If the digestive fire is really low and there's no appetite, or there's very little appetite, then fruit would be the best option because it would be easier to digest. If there's like a really voracious appetite, then barley or something more grounding would be better to satiate it for a while. And it might even want like some nut butter or something, protein or fat, to put to make it even more grounding. So those are the ways to think about it. And then the next question is, what is a way to improve Agni before eating? Drink an 8-ounce glass of warm water 15 minutes before you eat. That'll hydrate the stomach lining and help it release its gastric enzymes. And then also, as long as you don't have excessive pitta or ulcers or too much acidity, you can also take ginger, fresh ginger. So you take a fresh ginger and take the skin off and do a thin slice and put it on a spoon with a little squeeze of lemon or lime, a pinch of salt, and a drizzle of honey, and you eat that. And that'll also, so that with some warm water, or warm water with lemon or something. Some people like that, but even if it's just water to hydrate and then the ginger, that'll give everything like a boost. It'll help release the digestive enzymes. Thank you for your messages, Matt. Yeah. And then M, thank you for your reflections. Yes, it's the unexpressed grief. The name of the author, Kaylee, is Martin, Martin, Prechtel, Prectel. M asks, could you please share the impact of relationship with trauma on ama? So we also have, in Ayurveda, we talk about the signs and symptoms of mental ama, and specifically those are also clogging to the system. And again, it's not the emotions themselves, it's the expression of them. So the unshed tears, the unexpressed rage, the unexpressed terror, those actually need to be gently welcomed to the surface. And the best way to do that is to create a safety in the body. You have to be in a safe environment in your, in your living situation, usually some stability, or working closely with a therapist, someone that you feel safe with, to be able to help those pathways open and move. That is a lot of the work that I do in my coaching with Ayurveda, because I found over the last 12 years that specifically people who I only did the Ayurvedic coaching with from a very physical standpoint, there was still that energetic, emotional thing that needed to be brought to the surface. So then I dove more into therapeutics around the trauma-informed approach and specific trauma healing techniques, because also a lot of times people go through panchakarma or really deep cleanses, and they start to mobilize the stuff in their tissues that have been lodged in there and held in there, and they start cleansing it. We need the tools to be able to emote and move that without over attaching to it, identifying with it, continuing loops with that. So yeah, I'm glad you asked about it, because there's a close relationship, and there is a thing called mental ama. It's an energetic ama. It's the stuff that the cells have held on to. And usually the connection with food and digestion, they're all interrelated. So those parts of us the imprints, the samskaras the imbalances themselves can have their own set of cravings, because every food we take in, everything we eat, it holds our state of consciousness, what we digest, and foods have qualities, foods that are like living qualities that affect us, and they will impact our state of consciousness between meals and beyond. And so if it's an imprint of an emotional thing that is having a craving, and we reach for that thing, but we don't have true hunger, perhaps, then it turns to ama. And then we're actually just feeding the pattern. So we want to try to feed our highest self and not feed the pattern, while also honoring and respecting the pattern and support it to its own liberation. And that's a really important whole process of Ayurvedic practice. So thank you for bringing that up. It's definitely connected. Yes, I do remember you're in Jamaica, Kaylee. So I think fruit's the best option. Fresh fruits from all around you. All right. Okay, I think we got all the questions, friends. Thank you so much. And thank you for those of you who could stay late. Thanks for hanging with it. And I will also send out this recording to email. So always email me with any of your questions, or even if you want a consult, you can always request that via email, hello@alicialyndiaz.com. I will, in a couple of weeks, get out more information about the fall Pitta cleanse, and yes. And so we can explore more of that. And then we meet for this class on the second Wednesday of each month. That's our endeavoring for this year, for the last 2 years or more. And it's been really lovely to get to see all of you each month. So thank you for those who've been continuing to participate, and also welcome to new faces. And I hope you continue with us. I'll just sing one closing prayer, and then we'll sign off for today. Loka samasta sukino bhavantu. Om shanti shanti shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. If you're watching this as a recording and you're not on the list yet, make sure you go to alicialyndiaz.com and just sign up for the workshops. And then you'll get all the recordings and notes. I'll send that out soon as the video is done rendering. And I will talk to you all very soon. Lots of love. Blessings. Bye.